If there is one thing I appreciate about Lyrical Monasterio, it's definitely in the way they design each of the new ride decks, as they tend to play around with the mechanic that doesn't really fit into the 5-main nation, making it very fun to play even if some of the gimmicks are actually not fun to play on launch. And for LBTO4, I do have to say every single gimmick do have some fun in them, but none are as unique as Siana. Like, you have decks being able to actually play 3 orders per turn, you have decks that actually copies Dimension Police in the Radical setting, and then you have decks that actually works like a successor to the V Anje in the form of Pacifica that actually search for normal unit from deck, any normal units by the way. And then we have Siana, which as I mentioned just now is the most unique of all, and this recording was done right after the review of Prism, so this is true in every word, at least for the LBTO4. So what does Siana do, and is the deck actually viable for the format? That is exactly what I'm gonna be covering on today. So Siana, the playstyle of Siana is definitely very unique because I haven't seen any other deck actually do something that is exactly the way Siana do it. But if you want me to put it into one simple sentence metaphorically, I would say Siana playstyle is very reminiscent of an EI. You actually strike only when the chance comes, and it usually deadly. But until then, you usually either stall for opponent through intimidation, or essentially just making sure that your opponent lose the will to fight before you actually strike. And that is exactly what Siana actually do, disrupting your opponent resources via the rear guards or hands, and then strike when it's right with its critical. So to split Siana playstyle, we have to talk about both defensive part or the disruption part and the offensive part in separate parts. In terms of defensive wise, Siana does have a very unique skill that is available to almost every single iteration of her, with the exception of the Great Zero, where your opponent has to either discard or bind that rear guard if those rear guard attack Siana, and you chose not to put any card from your hand into the guard circle. That kind of disruption skill is actually very unique because it forces your opponent to think whether do you want to lose this rear guard forever, or you actually want to keep it at a cost of 1 card in your hand. This will definitely hurt decks that tends to take a little bit longer to get into their full gear, like Ignis is a very good example of that. But you might ask, how the hell Siana actually defending herself then if you are not trying to call cards from your hand into the guard circle? Well, it kind of boils down to 2 things. Siana unique mechanic of being able to gain both soul and also temporarily boost of power for that battle, and of course Blitz Order. For those who don't know, Blitz Order actually works in a way that it played in the order zone, so that means that you actually didn't really put a card into the guard circle, which essentially means that you didn't really play any card from your hand into your guard circle, making it fulfilling Siana condition. And this is also the reason why Elementary Sanctitude was such a scary card, because of the fact that the card essentially bypassed 90% of the guard restrict that is currently available in the format. Then we move on to the offensive part of the deck. Most of the offensive part of the deck does involve 2 aspects of it. For one, it prefers your opponent to not have a lot of unit in the front row. So this was done through either the defensive bind effect or ability to bounce card from your opponent front row back to hand. And what do you get from those kind of skill? Well, it kind of varies, but you usually either get a critical and drive through Siana effects, you can get additional power and draw with Tereteus, but in general you are trying to empty your opponent front row to get more advantage for yourself as well. And the most unique part about this is actually Siana on attack effects, as your opponent are forced to put at least 3 cards from their hand to actually negate the skill, making it kind of like a guard restrict but not at the same time. And this is where I feel Siana's strongest point is really at, forcing your opponent to think through every single step they are trying to do, because one misstep means that it's gonna be a huge either reduction in defense in the later turn, or literally they cannot play their game in the later part of the game, making it a chance for Siana to actually strike down with her additional drive and crit. And you know, depending depend on the build. If you build like me with a lot of crits, that's an OTK. But Siana does have its own issue, and that is kind of boils down to two things. For one, she bounces Vanguard from row back to hand. This means that a card that opponent do use to essentially gain advantage can be reused once again. But at the same time, because they can reuse those cards, if those cards give opponent more cards, this also helps to deck them out, which is another Siana win con as well. But this also means that you are putting equal risk onto the fact that on call can actually finish your own board as well if it is a retire based card, or finish you in their own game before they actually deck out because of all the additional advantage you give to them. Secondly, this deck does rely on blitz order, and this is a few occasions where the deck is being hindered by the base game mechanic itself because blitz order is currently only available once per turn. This means that if you happen to draw a lot of blitz order during the later part of the game, they are bricks, as there is not a lot of way for Siana to actually utilize those extra blitz order if you already use one within that turn. But overall, I do think Siana is viable in the current format, but it's currently only countering the decks that are capable of rushing or doesn't have enough power to actually push through Siana's defensive capability. Siana definitely counter those. So things like My Go or the recently released Prism. The video of Prism is coming soon as well. Overall, I do think that Siana definitely has its place in the current meta, even if it is kind of like a specific counter to easily one of the most scary deck to play against to me, and that is Rush deck. But what do you guys think? Do leave down in the comments below, as through my testing, a lot of different opinion about Siana has been mentioned, so I'm really curious what you guys think. So do leave down in the comments below. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, and this is McMegane signing out.